I only started covering mods about halfway through last year, but in that time I've talked about nearly 30 of them. That said, whilst I did enjoy all of them, hence why I made the videos, there are some which I would consider to be my personal favourites. So today, let's count down the top 10 mods I played in 2024. Also, this video is sponsored by Holy, but more on that later. And just to clarify before we get to the list, yes, this means mods I played in 2024, not mods that came out in 2024. So if some of these are older, don't come attack me in the comments, okay? Cool. Starting off at number 10, we have the Lost Calm mod. In short, this mod adds a massive amount of new dinosaur units to the Lizardmen roster, alongside a decently fleshed out mechanic to collect them. It's fairly simple in execution, and the balance is a little bit sus, which is why it's not getting any higher. But the 30 new units added are plentiful in both size and quantity. There's over 30 new units added, and the variety in that 30 is extremely strong, with smaller, faster blitz attackers, all the way to the new biggest units in the game. Like I said, the balance on some of these is outright broken in both directions, so I really can't recommend this as something you want to use in every campaign. But for a one-off fun playthrough every now and then, it's a really great mod and a whole lot of fun. And also the units just look really cool, so that's neat. At number 9, we have the Necromancy mod. In a similar vein of poorly balanced but a lot of fun, we have Necromancy. Now, it's taking every fibre of my undead loving being not to place this higher, but I have to exercise some restraint one of these days. This mod adds the mechanic I have literally been asking for years. Every time you beat an enemy army in combat, you collect various kinds of bones based on the units you killed in that battle. You can then spend those bones to raise undead versions of those units into your own armies. So you can battle against Wulfric and his army of mammoths, take them all out, and then raise them from the dead to do your bidding. It's extremely simple to get going, but like Lost Calm, it's simply outright broken. The undead versions of this many units just means the roster now has no weak points and is strong at basically everything, which makes for a pretty snowbally campaign. The sheer number and variety of undead units is absurd and makes navigating the raise dead menu into a nightmare. Don't get me wrong, I really love this idea and would love to see something like it implemented into the game for the Vampire Counts rework, but this current form is just hilariously broken. If you are an undead enjoyer, then give this a go. I'm certain you'll have a lot of fun, but I probably wouldn't leave it on all the time. Moving away from the, for lack of a better term, gimmick mods and onto something that I can see myself leaving on permanently. The Phoenix Court is one of the most recent mods I've covered, and I was seriously impressed by how much I was enjoying it. The High Elves have never been one of my favourite factions. They're meant to be baby's first campaign, so a little bit simple and living for my undead tastes. However, this mod, even with these seemingly small changes, makes them a lot more fun to play all the way into the late game. It's essentially bringing the Tower of Zar from the Chaos Dwarves over to the High Elves and giving it new effects and a clean coat of paint. However, in practice, because the mechanic takes a lot of turns to engage with all the way through, it has a constant presence for you to think about. You choose your faction and will have a speciality for some area of the tree, so you race to get those seats first to make the most of them. You might even have to usurp someone else and cause some tension between factions to benefit yourself. At the higher tiers, your commitment to a certain plan can bring some extremely powerful bonuses, so you're rewarded for making a plan and sticking to it for the entire game. Plus, it gives you an actually engaging way to confederate the other High Elves. Confederation is one of my all-time favourite things to do in game and collect all of the Pokemon legendary lords of a faction. Any mechanic that makes it a bit more interesting than grinding to increase your power level and hoping they get pushed back to a single settlement with no armies and say yes is going to be a win. If you, like me, have written off the High Elves as boring, install this mod and give them a try. I promise you'll find it a lot more compelling than these small changes may seem. Speaking of small changes making a big impact, maybe you should change over to drinking Holy and experience its impact for yourself. Look folks, we've all heard the saying, new year, new me. But we all really know that by the time February rolls around, we're normally right back to new year, new record for most time spent rotting in bed. I'm not judging, I'm right there with you. Not actually in bed, that'd be kind of weird. It can be hard to find the energy to get back into the swing of life whilst also working on some of these New Year's resolutions. And you see, that's where Holy comes in. Their energy drinks powders are pretty much as good as it gets when it comes to kickstarting your day, and it really comes down to 4 main pillars. Number 1, it's fast. You add 1 scoop to 500 ml of energy, give it a shake, and in under a minute, you've got yourself a delicious drink chock full of energy. Number 2, it's tasty. Sometimes when you need energy, you drink something just for the caffeine. With Holy, you won't have that problem as they have a wide range of flavors to choose from, and pretty much all of them are bangers, so you can't really go wrong. Number 3, it's healthy. Not only are all of their drinks less than 20 calories per serving, they're also sugar-free, only use natural flavors and colors, and full of vitamins, so not only is this stuff not bad for you, it's actually really good for you. And 4, plain and simple, it's cheap. You can buy a single tub for 50 servings and it works out to just 80p, takes up no space and is actually good for you. I could go on, but you get it by now. So if you want to check them out, head on down to the link in the description and pick yourself up a starter set. The individual sets for energy, hydration, and iced tea are currently £5 off, and the deluxe starter set that has all 3 is £35 off. And you can also use code Colonel5 to not only support the channel, but also get £5 off whatever you want to buy. The bottom line is there has never been a better time than right now to give them a try, so one more time, click the link below to get started, and thank you, and Holy, for supporting the channel. Coming in at number 7, we have the Bretonnian Overhaul. Now, I make it no secret that I don't really care for Bretonnia. Cavalry focus aside, their faction mechanics are just plain bad and or boring. So when I went into the Bretonnian Overhaul collection, I didn't have particularly high hopes for me enjoying the faction. Well, I'm extremely glad to have been extremely wrong, because this overhaul makes them at the bare minimum functional and actually quite a bit of fun to play. When you look at the changes written down in front of you, it seems like hardly anything has changed, and that's honestly because not much has. Instead, the mod makers chose the route of simply reworking what was already there to not make it shit. The farms and industry buildings are both vastly improved, allowing much easier economy management, whilst also requiring some thought and planning other than farm spam. The chivalry system is now worth grinding to get to higher tier rewards, and the upgraded Green Knight. Even the tech tree changes are genuinely really good and make them a lot better to play. Instead of some giant change like new mechanics, this is instead a bunch of little tweaks that come together to make a more complete whole. It's not the craziest mod in the game, but you could leave this one on anytime you're playing as Bretonnia and have a better experience than you would otherwise. Until they get another rework, I'm calling this an essential pickup for any Bretonnia enjoyer. Coming in at number 6, we have Araby from the OVN collection. Now, I went through the full OVN roster over the course of 2024, but the one that stuck with me as the pinnacle of their modded factions was Araby. They're just so in-depth and fleshed out that you could tell me they're an official DLC faction, and I'd probably believe you with no follow-up questions. Now sure, some of their mechanics are rips from others, like the Grand Bazaar basically being another crafting menu, like the Canopic Jars and the Mortuary Cult. But if CA can do that for the Dwarven Forge, I think this is fair enough. The two sides of the faction, the Nomads and the City Slickers, and the interaction either side have with your buildings makes you actually plan out what you want to build in your armies and your cities so you can get the optimal result for your faction. Whilst I like having access to a full roster as often as possible, forcing you to choose and upgrading whatever choice you do make makes it a lot more interesting and incentivizes multiple campaigns, and how many factions can you say that for? The fact that each of the 3 factions in the mod have their own playstyles and mechanics makes it feel like a real high quality DLC, and the fact that each one of these mechanics are actually pretty fun is a cherry on top. And we haven't even talked about the roster. It's full size and has a distinct playstyle unique to the faction. It even comes with a unique law of magic. I could go on, but the bottom line is this mod is basically a DLC, and if CA were to ever officially add Araby, they've got a pretty high bar to make this mod obsolete. Speaking of mods that feel like a DLC, expanded rosters. This mod / collection of mods adds a massive amount of units to a whole range of factions, and each one of them feels like something you'd see in a DLC. In fact, in Omens of Destruction, we saw a bunch of these units added officially for the greenskins, so that's how you know the mod makers know what they're doing. They've essentially gone to the army books Warhammer 3 factions and filled in the gaps with lore-accurate units, not just to pad out rosters and patch holes, but do it in a way that's faithful to the faction. In some cases, you get something really exciting like the Nap for bomb throwers for the Chaos Dwarves. In others, we're talking Snotlings for the greenskins, which are, to be honest, useless. Not all of them are super top-of-the-line hits, and that's okay, as long as they're filling a gap, which they almost always are. In my opinion, this is a mod you can install and leave enabled at all times, provided you don't run into any conflicts. It just makes all of the factions included rosters feel a lot more complete without being unbalanced. A bit of a short entry, but it's just that solid, it feels like it should have been there all along. Speaking of which, high-resolution user interface improvements. If you ever tune into an episode of the Old Grumblers podcast, then you know that one of our major gripes is the game's horribly inefficient use of space by the user interface. Someone at CA is in love with scroll bars and is making it our problem by sticking them literally everywhere that they can. Well, this mod aims to alleviate some of that issue by actually scaling the UI to higher resolutions than 720p. Now yes, there is some scrolling here and there, but I can accept that when the UI is actually making use of the screen rather than being limited to a tiny part of it for no reason. If you're playing Warhammer 3 on anything larger than a phone screen, you should have this mod installed and enabled at all times. Now you might be thinking this is far too high in the ranking, and I want you to know that I considered putting it higher. That's just how good it is. Simple? Yes. But what other mod do I leave on at literally all times apart from the skipping logos at the start, but that's not as exciting. Starting off the top 3, we have the Tomb Kings Extended mod. Back in the day when the Tomb Kings got added, they were the peak of innovation, and over the years they've fallen down the rankings until today where they're a little bit stinky and old. This mod brings them back to life, so to speak, and floods them with new mechanics that keep you busy all game long. The canopic jars can be used to rush construction, which makes them feel a lot more new since that is an exclusively new faction mechanic at the minute. You earn them a lot faster from more sources, but have more to spend them on, so are incentivized to keep them moving instead of simply hoarding them like you normally do. There's changes to each of the base factions, offering them tweaked faction and lord effects alongside granting them the option of an alternate starting location, essentially giving you 4 new campaigns. There's 2 entirely new lords with their own mechanics and playstyles, but by far the most in-depth mechanic in the whole mod is the new pyramids. Instead of being landmark buildings that you build and call it a day, you instead now build the landmark and unlock a whole new screen for pyramid building. This has a huge range of new buildings with new and powerful effects, and they will keep you busy for hours into the late game with the extreme cost and risk associated with building them up. The late game is always a struggle to keep players engaged, but with this mechanic it will take you well over 100 turns to see everything. If the Tomb Kings were to ever get a DLC and a rework, this is how I would want it to look. Coming in second place, we have Nagash. Is my undead bias showing? Maybe. Look, I know having 2 of the top 3 beat undead factions may seem like it is biased, but this mod is really just that good. It adds 3 new factions to the game, and each of them has their own mechanics that make them totally unique to play. You have the Hexers of the Wailing Conclave offering you powerful abilities in campaign, alongside their ethereal focus on the battlefield. The Lamian Sisterhood has their seduction and cults, similar to Slaanesh, but with a vampiric coat of paint to make it feel nice and new. Then, Nagash. He has almost too many mechanics and really does feel like the main character of all the undead. He has places of death settlements strewn all over the map which allow him to build regions to unholy levels of power and unlock the full power of his extended roster. He has a questline where he grows in power from a measly, barely undead caster to the lord of all undeath and a force of actual death. He can make use of almost every undead unit from every undead faction in the game. He can unite the forces of undead across the world as part of his great ritual, and he even has a set of powerful rights he can utilize by spending Warpstone. He's one of the most fleshed out and deep factions in the game, modded or not, and has enough to keep you busy for hundreds of hours. I know I've said this a bunch of times today, but if Nagash ever gets officially added, CA are going to have their work cut out for them, because this mod, and Nagash in particular, is truly phenomenal. If you have even a passing interest in undead factions, try this mod, and I can guarantee you, you'll be blown away. A few honourable mentions before we get to the number 1 spot of mods that are still really great but didn't quite make the list for one reason or another. Guns, Smoke and Spectacle. This is a really cool mod and does make battles look a lot more cinematic. I just found it occasionally bugs out and doesn't work, and even then it isn't quite impactful enough to break the top 10. C Specifics Skill Queue, which is kind of hard to say, is a really great feature that I wish was in the base game since I build most generic characters the exact same every time. It didn't make the list, it does tend to get a little bit broken quite often and can be quite a faff to get set up even if it is working once you're in game. And lastly, Army Carousel. Similar to Skill Queue, I wish it was in game because it makes navigating between armies and heroes much easier to understand. I just don't absolutely need it all the time and don't miss it that much when it isn't there, so it doesn't quite break the top 10. And coming in first place, we have the Victory Conditions Overhaul. Now look, I know this may be a controversial take, so just hear me out. Warhammer 3 is a sandbox. I know that, but sometimes you want to chill out and be sent on an epic adventure. The victory conditions in base Warhammer 3 are total poopy for almost every single faction, and it makes playing them a bit of a drag. You have no direction, so just end up doing whatever the game throws at you, which is the exact same thing every single time because the AI, well, it ain't that intelligent. Instead of you playing the game, it seems a lot more like the game is happening and you're just in it. Now, obligatory, this mod doesn't yet cover every single faction in the game, so judge that how you will. However, the factions that are affected are massive improvements over the base game. Not only do victory conditions have actual objectives like taking on certain factions, making alliances and playing the game beyond just mashing end turn whilst the world moves around you, we also have several different options for most factions. This means you can choose to go in any direction you want and gives each campaign a lot more replay value. Each set of conditions are also given some lore and flavor text to justify their goals, which is such a nice touch and gives your campaign a cool story to follow. And lastly, the rewards for achieving these conditions are actually worth the effort and makes you want to keep playing afterwards to test them out. Pretty much every complaint I have about the base game victory conditions is fixed with this mod, and I can see no reason outside of conflicts to ever have this disabled. I've literally thrown this mod at Sean from the Creative Assembly team when he was on the Old Grumblers podcast, which you can watch for yourself, as an example of how I want victory conditions to be. It is my hope and dream that CA will one day come to the mod makers and slip them a tenner to use this mod in the base game and get them to do the rest of them. All it's doing is changing some text in a box and adding some flavor, and it makes every campaign it affects feel brand new. And that's my list of the best mods I played in 2024. Let me know in the comments what some of your favourite mods are. I'm always looking for more to talk about. Like, subscribe, don't forget to check out Holy at the link below, and if you want more Warhammer 3 videos, then check out this one, all about the legendary characters modded campaigns.